Okay, welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating set of sources that you, our listener, shared. This material seems tailored for a genuine seeker, someone with an open mind for truth. It explores, well, traditional beliefs, but also introduces this proposed direct divine next level movement for whole humankind from Guriad. Our aim today is really to cut through any confusion and just pull out the core insights these specific texts offer for someone on that path.
Exactly. And, the sources you sent are, well, they're rich and complex. They definitely touch on some fundamental questions about truth, tradition, and this distinct path being presented. Just to be clear up front, our goal here is simply to explore the ideas within these sources impartially. We're not endorsing any specific viewpoint, just unpacking what they say for you.
Right. So let's jump in. For you, the seeker, what do these sources actually reveal about figuring out different truth claims? What's the core idea of this direct divine next level movement? And, how do these sources say it's different? Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Okay, so the sources kick things off by looking at traditional religious claims about God and paradise. They point out, how many religions say only one God, but then often seem to compete, arguing their God is the top one, others are false or maybe lesser.
And that often leads to conflict, historically speaking. The sources highlight that dynamic. And then they go deeper, looking at descriptions of heaven or paradise in places like, well, Islam, Christianity, Hinduism. What they find, according to these texts, is that these places often sound very spatial, phenomenal, like involving things you can sense or perceive.
Phenomenal meaning.
Meaning people living there, talking, worshiping, having interactions, all happening in some kind of location, seemingly for eternity.
Yeah.
So the sources ask, if paradise is like that, a place with interactions, how can it also be truly beyond space-time, beyond all created reality, as some traditions also claim?
Right. The description itself seems to place it within some kind of dimension, doesn't it?
That's the logical point they're making, yeah. It seems contradictory if you take both claims literally.
And they push this further, suggesting that maybe the desire for that kind of eternal life, without suffering in heaven, might actually be an ego thing.
How so?
Well, think about it. Living forever, no suffering. Aren't those qualities usually just for God? So the sources kind of suggest maybe wanting that is like the ego wanting to become God, wanting that ultimate power and permanence for itself.
Ah, I see. That's a provocative thought. And the ego's role is definitely a theme. They also look at mystical experiences, things like Kundalini phenomena, seeing lights, hearing sounds, visions, things seekers often value.
Yeah, those can feel really significant.
They can. But the sources argue these experiences often just feed the ego, that I had something special happen to me feeling. And crucially, they say the experience itself, if it's not tied to the genuine source, gives no real direction. Like, what do you do with that light you saw?
So it's not about the flashy experience.
Not primarily, no. The focus, they insist, must be on the source of the experience, because Maya illusion, this powerful energy they describe, can apparently create any kind of experience. If the source you're connected to isn't pure, complete, beyond Maya, well, you could just be experiencing a very convincing illusion.
Okay, so that really raises the stakes. How do you know if it's real or just Maya messing with you?
That's the core challenge they present for the seeker. It always comes back to, what is the nature of the source you're drawing from? Is it verifiable? Is it complete? The experience alone isn't proof.
Right. Source over experience. That feels key. So shifting gears, how do the sources offer a different perspective then? They bring up a call.
Yes, a call is central. They contrast it with traditions that might say ultimate truth is just a complete mystery. We have no idea. But Gurgani's concept of a call, as presented here, isn't just mysterious. It's described as truly boundless, beyond time, beyond even infinite universes, limitless creative potential.
And there's that controversial point about the word itself.
Yeah, that's pretty striking. They claim that maybe 200, 300 years ago, there was a deliberate effort to confuse its meaning. Specifically, they mention Brahmins, allied with the British, promoting the use of a call, maybe slightly different pronunciation, but close enough to mean drought or famine.
Wow. To deliberately muddy the waters.
That's the argument in these sources. To obscure the original meaning of timeless, boundless, beyond creation. It suggests a historical reason for current confusion around core ideas.
Okay, so given potential distortions and the critiques of other paths, what's left for the seeker to actually do? What's in our hands?
Well, the sources say it's a hope.
Hope.
Yeah, but specifically hope in the truth itself. They advise, don't settle for less than the whole thing. Your own efforts, meditation, study, whatever, might fall short. And if they do, the sources say, okay, be hopeless about your effort, recognize its limits, but never lose hope in the ultimate reality you're seeking. Keep that aspiration pure.
So hope in the goal, not necessarily in your ability to reach it alone.
Exactly. And here's a distinctive part.
Yeah.
If you maintain that pure hope focused only on the truth, the source will guide you. It will reveal itself. Maybe not through your striving, but perhaps through someone or something that is its direct manifestation.
A manifestation, like how?
They describe it as a non-dimensional murat, or identity. It's crucial, they stress, it's not a physical form, not 3D, not an idol, but it is a discernible, verifiable identity or presence, non-local, complete.
Okay. Identity. How does that connect to name?
Right. They clarify that name isn't just a word to chant. Its fundamental meaning is identity or recognition, like an ID card verifies who someone is. So this non-dimensional identity, this Akal source, is the name. It's the verifiable presence that can guide you directly, beyond just facts or concepts.
I think I'm getting it. It's about recognizing a specific non-physical identity that is the source. And they use that jot metaphor too, right?
Yeah.
Light.
Yes, exactly. Jot as light, but specifically like a wave or a ray. A kiran, coming from a source, the jyoti. They use this for consciousness, the mind or man. It's like a ray that is emanated from its original source. And the whole point, the whole game, as they put it, is for that individual consciousness, that ray, to reunite with its original source, the Jyoti.
So the goal isn't a place like heaven, but returning to the source itself.
Precisely. A return to origin. That's the destination presented in these texts.
Okay. Now, these sources, they don't shy away from internal critiques either. They mention apparent contradictions even within Sikh tradition.
They do. They specifically point to differing statements in Guru Granth Sahib versus Sarbloh Granth about the relationship between God, Guru, and Khalsa. And they don't mince words. They call it a significant contradiction, like 180 degrees opposite, which they say naturally leads to confusion for seekers trying to find the authentic path.
And why do they think these contradictions pop up?
Their argument is that this kind of confusion happens when the focus shifts away from the primary, revealed source, that identifiable, verifiable identity we talked about. When people start relying more on derivative texts, interpretations, or even historical accounts, however respected, well, things can get muddled. Many paths, they suggest, end up relying on guidance without that kind of flawless, verifiable source, which then leads to subjective views, maybe rules used for social control, or ideas based more on survival or culture than absolute truth.
So if the foundation isn't that pure, directly accessible source, the structure built on it can become unstable or contradictory.
That's the idea presented, yes. And they add that historical context we touched on earlier, the claim that authentic Sikh history and ideas were deliberately suppressed or twisted. They mention Brahmins working with Mughals, then later with the British, actively introducing confusing concepts or misusing terms like Akal, precisely to block access to the pure understanding.
Which makes finding that true source even more critical today, if that history is accurate according to these sources.
Right. And they also critique a kind of hypocrisy they see.
Right.
Where maybe a group correctly points out flaws in other religions like idols or descriptions of God in space, but then they fall into a similar pattern themselves by maybe using metaphors in a way that becomes rigid or promoting their own leader or text to a point where it's like idolizing concepts, creating their own dogmas, building a different house, the sources say, but on the same flawed foundation, relying on something within creation or human interpretation, not the absolute source itself.
Okay, this deep critique sets the stage for their main proposition, doesn't it? This direct divine next level movement for whole humankind proposed by Guryad. This is framed as the new revelation needed now, and they make that really bold claim comparing previous understandings, even in Islam, to jahil.
Yes, jahil, which they use here to mean fundamentally ignorant or unenlightened about the complete absolute truth when compared to this new direct revelation. It's a very strong statement. And the key distinction they emphasize for this movement is that it's based on a currently revealed, flawless, identifiable, verifiable source of pure direction.
That's the absolute difference maker for them.
It seems to be. They argue many paths might describe what truth isn't the nirgun, a tributeless aspect, God beyond form, but they fail, according to these sources, to provide a verifiable, living understanding of what truth is in an accessible way. This proposed source is presented as the GPS for consciousness.
The actual guidance system to get back home, so to speak.
Exactly. Direct, unerring guidance from a complete, pure, currently accessible point, enabling the mind, the man, to return to his origin.
And they also say connecting to this source makes everyone equal.
Yes, that's a significant point. Regardless of background, past beliefs, when you connect, because you're connecting directly to the living hukum, the divine command, the active will of that occult source, which they state is now directly accessible through the Satguru, who is identified with this revealed source.
Okay. And there was one more point about consciousness needing interaction.
Right. Just briefly, they suggest that for consciousness to develop understanding, to become aware, focused, gather info, it typically needs to interact within a phenomenal world like our space-time. That learning process usually happens on a relative plane. But the occult source they propose, and the connection to it, is presented as transcending that, offering a different level of reality and understanding beyond those relative limitations.
Wow. Okay. So let's just take a step back. We've journeyed through these sources, looking at critiques of traditional heavens, the absolute stress on the source over mere experience, the potential confusion from history and contradictions, and then landing on this proposal of a revealed, verifiable next-level source offering pure direction.
Yes, it's quite a journey. And these sources really challenge you, the seeker, to look past established frameworks, past experiences, and really scrutinize the origin of your knowledge and guidance. What is the actual source?
So here's that final thought, specifically for you, the seeker who shared these texts. In this world just packed with competing claims and paths, how do you personally tackle that incredibly tough challenge, discerning a true, flawless, verifiable source that genuinely transcends all the limits and confusions we've talked about today? And given that emphasis on AD, what does holding on to hope truly mean for you right now on your own path?
It's a lot to think about. Definitely continue exploring these fundamental ideas with that open mind you started with. Hopefully this dive into the sources you provided gives a useful starting point.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing these really thought-provoking sources with us, and thanks for joining us for this deep dive.